All right, Sens fans, it's trade deadline time. What do you want your team to do? What do you think they need to do? Who should they move out and who should they be bringing in? I really like the Sens as a team. I have a couple of friends who are big Sens fans, but the one thing I kept telling them going into and throughout this season was they're just not ready. They're going to be a good team, just not this year. First up, if I'm in charge at the Sens, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to move some players to get back some of the types of picks I gave up to move off what seemed like some deadweight contracts. Remember, the Senators included a third round pick in the trade that sent Matt Murray to the Maple Leafs. And more recently, the Sens moved Nikita Zaitsev and had to include 2 picks to get that done as well. When you look up and down the Senators roster, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of movable pieces in that they don't have many unrestricted free agents. You might be able to get something for Austin Watson if you move him to a team that's looking for a little bit of toughness. Now, Travis Hamonic to some teams might be thought of as a useful piece. Hamonic's a bit puzzling, though. You'd probably have to choose the team you trade him to wisely. In the past, he's expressed his interest really only to play in certain markets, mostly teams in Canada, and I think even mostly in the West. So that one might be a little bit tricky to do as well. After seeing one depth goalie move made already this week when Keith Kincaid was traded by Boston to Colorado, I'm wondering what the market might be like for a player like Cam Talbot. Cam's a pending UFA, and I'm sure Ottawa could retain some of his slightly more than $3 million salary, and he could be attractive to a number of teams out there. It's hard to say really what the market would be for Talbot. I don't think they would really expect a great return for him. But for a player who's not realistically going to be in the Sens' plans moving forward, I think it's wise to get something for him if you can. Lastly, I know it's something that they've already said they won't do, but I wonder what type of an offer would be out there for an Alex DeBrincat. There's going to be a lot of players moving forward on the Sens who are going to be expecting big raises. And the fact that DeBrincat's at slightly over $6 million right now, and a pending RFA, so he'll probably get at least that or more on another contract. I don't know that by the time the Sens are really ready to take that next step, that DeBrincat's really still going to be in the plans. So it may be prudent to actually try to move him now before any of that happens and before you've signed him to a contract that maybe another team wouldn't like. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this team moving forward. Like I said, I think they're going to be real good. I think they just need to be ready. Well, Leaf fans, this video was going to be about what the team should do at the trade deadline. But I think with recent moves that have taken place, it's going to have to be at least a little bit about what the team has already done leading up to the deadline. The Leafs have already made arguably the biggest move, landing Ryan O'Reilly and Noel Acciari from St. Louis. And just this afternoon, they picked up Sam Lafferty and Jake McCabe from the Blackhawks. What amazes me is when people talk about the Leafs and GM Kyle Dubas, they'll often say things like, well, this is it. That's their season. They're done. They can't make any more moves. And then somehow, miraculously, he finds a way to get another move made. Chicago will retain 50% of the salary on McCabe, who has 3 more seasons to go on his current contract. That's huge. McCabe, who is going to make, at least against the cap, $2 million, could be the solution to the fan base's woes with Justin Hall. However, he still may need to be moved in a separate transaction when Matt Murray comes off LTIR. Lafferty can score off the wing, and I think he gives the Leafs some roster flexibility if the team decides to go with the 3-headed monster of Matthews, Tavares, O'Reilly up the middle. And because he's still under contract for next season, could also provide some Michael Bunting insurance because he's going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. And his play over the past 2 seasons may have priced him out of what the Leafs can afford. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Leafs may need to move a player because Matt Murray is ready to come off of LTIR. And it looks like there's about $2 million or just under that's going to need to disappear from the Leafs cap before that can happen. This opens the door for the likelihood of one of the 2 moves I think most people in the media or fan base have been expecting. And that would be a trade of either Justin Hall or Alex Kerfoot. Hall has been a lightning rod over the past couple of seasons. He's certainly not my favorite defenseman on the team, and I don't think I'd be too upset if they decided to move him. Now that they do have McCabe, as I mentioned, another strong right side defenseman. They already have Connor Timmins as well, who's played really, really well, but just can't find his way into the lineup some nights. Kerfoot, a relatively reliable, hardworking forward, makes $3.5 million, and really that's the only reason why the Leafs would probably be looking to move him, just for the cap space. Still, he lacks a certain amount of finish, and he doesn't really slot well into center, so there may not even really be space available for him now with the recent additions. I'm still not sure that it's going to be Hall or Kerfoot. You could make the case that a more attractive player like Pierre Engvall might be the odd man out. And the Leafs could probably still get something for him in return, as opposed to Kerfoot and Hall, who they may need to sweeten the pot with to get a team to take. Kyle Dubas did say the team is still busy trying to do things before the deadline. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I can't wait. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll see what happens by Friday. To me, this is just another signature Dubas move, where he finds a way to fit the players he thinks he needs into the roster, still managing to get them into a good cap situation, in spite of the fact that they really have had no space on the cap for the past 3 seasons. Say what you want about the results over the past few years, but what you can't say is that Dubas isn't trying his best and isn't maximizing every ounce of roster flexibility, cap flexibility, prospect flexibility, and draft pick flexibility to do it. I think overall in those regards, aside from the fact that, yes, the team hasn't made it out of the first round of the playoffs since he's been here, he's still managed to accomplish quite a lot. Well, that's all for now in Leafland. We'll see you next time. Honey, where's my Montreal Canadiens t-shirt? So here we are at the trade deadline, and we're looking at the Montreal Canadiens. What can the Habs do this year to set themselves up for the next few years as their young players enter the roster and the players that are already there continue to grow and get better? The one thing that may get in the way of any moves that Montreal would make at this deadline are the number of injuries they have. They have as many as 10 players out of the lineup right now with injury. There still are a couple of guys that they could move off of. I don't think anyone is taking Jonathan Drouin. He just simply makes too much, and I don't think he's that effective of a player that anyone's really willing to take a look at him. One player on forward that I think the Habs could move is Evgeny Dodonov. He's got 4 20-goal seasons, and although he isn't putting up those type of numbers this year, if Montreal was to, say, retain half the salary to facilitate a move, I think there are teams out there who might want to take him for some scoring depth. 2 players, both on defense, that I think Montreal may want to try to trade would be Joel Edmondson and David Savard. Those are 2 players who normally a team wouldn't want to move off of, but if you can get a decent return, it certainly will help you with things down the road, as I said earlier. And again, you could probably retain a little bit of salary on both. Neither has a terribly high cap hit, but in order to get them to a couple other teams that may be interested, that's something you may want to explore. Now, Savard does have 2 seasons after this one, but again, you're probably only maybe retaining $1 million on him. So that even in the second year probably doesn't hurt you so bad because of the number of young, inexpensive players that you're going to have on the roster. The last player I'm thinking of is Mike Hoffman. Now, he doesn't put up the numbers he used to, and he's going to make $4.5 million next season. So that may be a trickier deal to make. It may be one that you do retain a little bit of salary on, and it is only for the 1 year. He's a player who can still put the puck in the net. If you put him on the right team with the right line mates, I'm sure he can be an effective scorer, even in a middle 6, third line type of a role. Now, you can only retain salary on 3 players at a time as per the CBA rules. And I know I've just mentioned 4 players who you could trade and possibly retain salary on. Now, I don't think the team is necessarily going to trade all 4, and they wouldn't necessarily be retaining salary on all 4. But it's just something that goes into the thought process. How could you make a team take this player? How could you make this trade work for you and still get a return that you like? Part of that might be retaining a little bit of salary. So who knows? You could see it on some of those players, all of those players, and maybe they do nothing and they keep all four. As the team moves forward, however, if they don't have those players on the roster, they would be able to weaponize some of that increased cap space with all of the young players they have coming on. They might be able to take on a 1 year or maybe even a 2 year bad contract from another team and get some assets to come along with it to make the deal even sweeter. It's going to be an interesting time. Again, with all the injuries and missing players, it's probably a very difficult time for the Habs to try to do anything because they actually need to have bodies who can play. Well, you let me know what you think. Leave a comment below. What should the Bleu Blanc et Rouge be doing this trade deadline to help improve the team? Please remember to like and subscribe. That's all for now, and we'll see you next time.